It's that age-old question, why do you climb? George Mallory was asked in the 1920s, and his answer is famous. It's because the mountains are there. But I think it's the challenge. It's putting yourself into the mountains where they don't care who you are, they don't care how much money is in your bank or what you're wearing or what status you are. The mountains are unforgiving. So it's challenging yourself to see how high you can go, how far you can push yourself. That's the kind of challenge that I enjoy, and I think it holds true for many people who like to climb or like to trek at high altitude. My name is Tom Comeau. I'm 50 years old. I'm married with 3 kids. Originally from Edmonton, Alberta, but I only lived there for a couple of years in my life. I grew up in a military family, so we moved around quite a bit throughout Canada and in Europe. For the last 20 years, I've been working for the Toronto Police Service, and over the last 10 years or so, I've found myself in the mountains, trekking or climbing. So leading up to my first mountain, I started at high altitude doing the Inca Trail back about 9 years ago in Peru, and that was something I really enjoyed. We got up to around 4,200 meters. I found that I really enjoyed that. So fast forward about 5 or 6 years later, I found myself in Nepal doing the Everest Base Camp trek, taking us up to close to 5,400 meters, and again I enjoyed that. And it was while we were at base camp that I realized I wanted to go higher and I wanted to climb some of the mountains that I was trekking through. So my first mountain was a mountain called Lobuche East Peak in Nepal. It's a 6,119 meter mountain, almost 21,000 feet. We climbed that about a year and a half ago. It was a great experience. It was very challenging, more challenging than I thought it was going to be, but something that I really enjoyed and made me want to climb more. For the first 2 treks, I didn't prepare all that much. So the Inca Trail, again, around 9 years ago, I had been going to the gym and trying to stay fit. So there really wasn't much specific preparation for that. I acclimatized well to the altitude. I didn't have any issues with the altitude. My wife suffered. She never really acclimatized when we were in Peru, but I was fine. And for the Everest Base Camp trek, it became a bit of a joke at work because I also didn't prepare. I thought I would just be able to go and get up to 5,300 meters without any issues. And I completed it, but I suffered. It was tough. As soon as you land in Lukla, which is around 3,000 meters, a little higher than 3,000 meters, almost 10,000 feet, you really feel the altitude. When you come off the airplane and climb up the first set of stairs, I found myself out of breath and thought this might be a long 2 weeks. But I made it, and again, when we were at Everest Base Camp, amongst all the mountains is when I decided I really wanted to prepare and start to climb some of these mountains. Right, so for Lobuche, I did prepare. So I was doing some running, I was going to the gym and doing a lot of cardio workouts, trying to prepare myself for the workout that it was going to be. Having done the Everest Base Camp trek before, I knew that to get to Lobuche, we had to pretty much do the entire Everest Base Camp trek again up to a small village called Lobuche, which is just before you get to Everest Base Camp. So this time I prepared, and it made the climb possible. I don't think I would have been able to do it if I hadn't prepared. I think, again, the climbing for me came into play when I was standing on the rock at Everest Base Camp, looking around at the mountains, seeing some of the other climbers at base camp getting ready to climb Everest, because we were there during the climbing season in April. So there were a lot of climbers climbing not only Everest, but other mountains, including Lobuche and climbing Amadablam and some of the other mountains. I really wanted to go back, and I really wanted to push myself to go higher. And you're right, we live at sea level, so it's a bit of an adjustment, and luckily I was able to find altitude, where I could do some training and pre-acclimatize to get used to being at altitude, and my brain could start to know that it's okay to be hypoxic and get my body ready for the altitude. There are risks that are involved. There are risks involved in everything in life, of course, but when you're in the mountains, there's always risk in terms of your own health and things around the environment that we have no control over. My family are supportive. I know they worry about me, and my friends worry about me when I'm away, but I partner with companies that I trust, and I've been fortunate to have guides that are very experienced, and they take your health and your well-being into consideration when they decide when to climb, where to climb, and how to climb. So it's, again, I know that my family worry, but I try to communicate with them the entire time that I'm away, and we're pretty lucky nowadays. Even in the Khumbu Valley, there's Wi-Fi almost everywhere, so I could speak to my family almost every day and set their mind at ease, let them know that I'm okay. Again, the risk is always something that we have to take into consideration. There is death, and there are bad accidents that happen sometimes in the mountains. A lot of things we can't control, but some things are in our control. Again, partnering with good companies and having good guides who monitor the weather, monitor the avalanche risk. So it's always a calculated risk when you climb, but we try to be prepared. And the thought of injury or the thought of something worse is always in the back of your mind, but you have to push that back while you do your climbing, otherwise you would never be able to make it. I've seen people that are suffering from either high altitude cerebral edema or from pulmonary edema, and they get taken down off the mountain fairly quickly. When I was in Nepal last time during the April climbing season, 3 of the Sherpa guides who were setting the fixed lines on the Khumbu Icefall were killed when there was a serac that fell. So it happens all the time, unfortunately, or most of the time. But so far, I've been fortunate and been fine. There are many mountaineers that inspire me, but I think the guides are the ones that really show the strength of the human spirit, whether they are Sherpa in Nepal or guides in South America or elsewhere. To see them work day in, day out, carrying some of the loads that they carry, sometimes wearing equipment that, old shoes, old sandals, while all of the Western climbers have the top of the line gear, is inspiring. To see them carrying 50, 60, 100 pounds on their backs, while we have a 10-pound pack. It's humbling, but they are very inspiring. But there are many mountaineers who are inspiring, watching them climb, seeing some of their stories. It's a small world, so you get to know quite a few people when you get into climbing. But for me, definitely the guides. Well, for those who live in the mountains, it's their way of living. So they don't, they have some options, but for some of them, that's their best way of earning a living. For the Western climbers, I think it's, it's that age-old question, why do you climb? George Mallory was asked in the 1920s, and his answer is famous. It's because the mountains are there. But I think it's the challenge. It's putting yourself into the mountains where they don't care who you are. They don't care how much money is in your bank or what you're wearing or what status you are. The mountains are unforgiving. It's challenging yourself to see how high you can go, how far you can push yourself. That's the kind of challenge that I enjoy, and I think it holds true for many people who like to climb or like to trek at high altitude. I think films like Nimsdai's 14 Peaks and all of the social media that's out there does motivate people to go into the mountains. I think most should start with reasonable goals of maybe trekking at high altitude, seeing how they do in thinner air, as opposed to going directly to climb mountains. I think You need to have some experience before you do that. So that's one of the negative aspects of all of the social media and some of the films, is that I think people see some of these movies and think that it's pretty easy, because all you see are the summit images. You see pictures on the summit and the high fives and the tears of joy. But with that, with mountains in the 8,000 meter range, for example, those are 45 to 60 day climbs. So you don't see the 2 months of suffering and the rotations going higher and higher and coming back down and not feeling well the entire time. So people forget that. I think they go to Nepal or Pakistan to climb some of these mountains, and sometimes with not enough experience. Some of the companies will take them because it's a lot of money. It's $50,000 to climb Mount Everest. So a lot of the companies will take some of these clients, putting them at risk. But again, it goes back to one of my earlier answers about partnering with good companies and good guides who would tell a prospective client that maybe, this is not a great idea. Maybe we start at something a little lower, start with a high altitude trek, as opposed to taking on the challenge of a riskier peak, a 7,000 or 8,000 meter peak. Well, if you're lucky enough to live around Toronto, we have an amazing fitness facility here with altitude, where you can come and put yourself at altitude and see what it feels like to be at 8, 9, 10,000 and plus feet, because it makes a difference. Again, people don't realize, because you don't know until you've been there, how your body is going to adjust or not adjust. So becoming hypoxic, seeing what that's like, and exerting yourself, whether it be on a treadmill, on a bike, or lifting weights, training with a coach. It's a great way to test yourself before you leave, and it's a great way to get ready for being at high altitude again, whether it's trekking or going into the mountains. So we're very lucky to have altitude here, and I'm so happy that I found this training facility. I think having someone to talk to about companies, who to choose, who to go with. Again, there are so many of them, especially in countries like Nepal, in Pakistan. There are a lot of companies, some of them more well known than others. So choosing can be very, very difficult. And gear, knowing about what equipment you need, what equipment you don't need. When I went to Nepal the first time, I had things in my backpack that I never touched because they were just completely unnecessary, but they add weight to your backpack. You think it's a good idea when you buy them because they might appear on a list somewhere, but it just ends up being weight that you have to carry. So having someone who has had some experience to chat with would have been great. And that's why I try to hold myself out to people who are looking to climb or to trek, to give them some advice. I don't know everything, but I have some information, and I'm always happy to pass that on to save money and save time, and to make it a safe and successful trek or climb. A couple really great ones would be the Inca Trail, like I did. It's a 4-day trek to Machu Picchu. So you end at a World UNESCO site, an amazing site. The trek is fairly gentle. Again, you only go up to about 4,300 meters, so it's not that bad. It's a great trek. The Everest Base Camp trek, or the Annapurna Circuit trek in Nepal, is another really good option, although it's a little longer and it's a little costlier to fly to Nepal and do these treks, but they're also a great experience. And then when you're ready to climb, Ecuador has some amazing mountains that you can climb in the 5,000 to 6,000 meter range, and you can do them in 1 or 2 days. But if you're looking for something a little more adventurous, you can also fly to Nepal, because that's where a lot of the mountains are. They don't even name mountains lower than 6,000 meters in Nepal. That's how many there are to choose from. And you can climb Lobuche East Peak, or Island Peak, or Mera Peak. Those are 3 very popular climbs in the 6,000 meter range, 6,000 to 6,500 meters. So that's what I would recommend for anyone looking to get into this sport. So Ecuador is beautiful. The people are amazing. South America is a great place to be. I arrived at a time when the country was actually in lockdown because of some political things going on at the time, so I didn't get to see the cities, which was too bad. But I was picked up from the airport and whisked right into the mountains. I had a great experience. The weather was decent for most of the time that I was there. I was there for about 10 days. I was able to climb 2 lower peaks to acclimatize for what my ultimate goal was, which was Chimborazo at about 6,300 meters. The climbing was great. It was very challenging. A lot of scrambling on one of the mountains, near 90-degree angles at some points in the rock, but it was a great experience. On Chimborazo, I wasn't able to summit, but I got up to the high camp, and that was amazing. It was my decision not to continue up to the summit for a couple of reasons. And one of them is something I should touch upon as well in terms of breaking in equipment. My boots, which I thought I had broken in enough, my 6,000 meter boots, had not quite been broken in enough. And during the climb from the refuge to the high camp, I tore my heels up pretty badly. So that was one of the reasons I decided to abandon my summit attempt, because I was in quite a bit of pain. But that's again, you have to prepare your equipment and know your equipment before you get to the mountain. But I plan on returning to Ecuador probably next year. I've already been speaking with the outfitter that I used last year to climb, if not Chimborazo, then I want to climb Cotopaxi, which just opened again. It was closed for about 3 years because it's been erupting for the last 3 years, but it's finally been deemed safe, so I'd like to climb Cotopaxi. So I prepared for this climb by coming to altitude for about 3 months, preparing for it, getting myself up to 21,000 feet with the help of my coach and the staff. So when I landed in Ecuador, much to my surprise, when I was picked up at the airport, we went straight to Cotopaxi National Park, where we did a hike up to 4,900 meters. So in a 24-hour period, I had gone from sea level, almost sea level in Toronto, to almost 5,000 meters or 16,000 feet, still wearing the clothes I'd flown in. I was still in running shoes and a pair of jeans, but I felt fine. And that's not something that I think would have been possible if I hadn't been training for several months here at altitude, getting ready for that climb. I think I would have been in a lot more trouble. But we got up to the top with no problem. We had a tea and came back down. And again, I'm thankful for my training at altitude, because that would not have been possible, I don't think, if I hadn't prepared beforehand. So I'm preparing now for Kilimanjaro in August. I'll be traveling with a group of colleagues from work, and we're going to be in a group of 15 climbers, and we're going to be led by Adriana Brownlee and Geljan Sherpa. They're both world record holders, and Geljan got some fame this last spring when he carried another climber down from Camp 4 to Camp 3 on Mount Everest on his back. He's an incredible climber. And so I'm looking forward to seeing them. I've met Adriana before, so that's going to be a great climb in Tanzania. And then next January, I'm booked to go climb Aconcagua in Argentina, and that's a 3-week expedition on the Polish Traverse, which is different from the normal route in terms of seeing a bit more of the mountain. It's also called the 360 Traverse. So we climb and see a bit more of the mountain as opposed to the normal route, and then we come back down through the normal route. So my goal is to climb an 8,000 meter peak, and right now I'm looking at Manaslu, which is the 8th tallest mountain in the world. It's 8,163 meters. For a couple of reasons. One is that it's a fall climb as opposed to the spring or summer climb that makes up most of the other 8,000 meter peaks. And it's a 30-day or 35-day climb typically, as opposed to the 45 to 60 days it takes to climb some of the other 8,000 meter peaks. So it works better for me in terms of lifestyle. Again, leaving my family for 30 days, that's very difficult. It's difficult for anyone that leaves on these expeditions to leave their families. So to be away for 30 days is hard enough. To be away for 2 months, I think, would be very, very difficult. So Manaslu is the one that's in my sights right now. And if that works out, if I'm successful on Manaslu, I never say never, but Manaslu is the one that I've been looking at. I think if I can inspire one person to push themselves beyond their comfort zone, to make themselves uncomfortable, because that's where growth is, that's where personal growth is. You don't grow in comfort, you grow when you're uncomfortable. Then I think I've done my job, and I hope my kids see that and push themselves as well in life. And that applies to everything, not just climbing mountains and mountaineering. It applies to everything in life. There's no personal growth if you just stay in that comfort zone all the time. So putting yourself in situations where you may not have that, I keep saying the word comfort, but being uncomfortable, that's where you'll better yourself. And so if I can inspire one person to do that, I'd be happy. I think they may. I'd like to take a couple of them trekking at some point to high altitude to see how they do, to see if they enjoy it, to put them in that uncomfortable zone of being physically uncomfortable. I think my daughter and my youngest have expressed some interest that they may want to find themselves in the mountains one day, and I'll support that. But when they're ready, I'd like to take them likely to Nepal. I think the message is always, or my message to people is always, try new things, see the world, travel, whether it's mountaineering, whether it's swimming, whether it's running a marathon, set those goals high, and if you prepare for it, you'll be successful. And we talked a little bit about my not summiting Chimborazo, and I always tell people the summiting is the icing on the cake. The adventure is in the travel to the country, the climb, meeting new people, making friendships with guides and with other climbers. The summit is always the icing on the cake, but there are many times when, for whatever reason, health, weather, the mountain decides when you're going to summit, and if it decides you're not going to summit, you don't summit, but it's still always an amazing adventure. So be willing to put yourself out there, try new things, and you have a long and happy life.